All right, listen to me for a second. Hey, yeah, you. To the one who felt something was off long before anyone said it out loud. To the one who kept going even when the room went quiet. To the one who's standing here right now, heart pounding, realizing, oh, this is that moment. Good. I'm talking to you. Everyone tried to warn you. Some of them yelled. Some of them whispered. Some of them hid it behind jokes, passive comments, little side eyes, just saying conversations that never fully said what they meant. And you heard it. Don't lie to yourself. You heard it. But you kept moving anyway. You had to. Because stopping would have meant admitting that everything you were building was shaking underneath you. And now, now it's already over. Not ending. Not about to. Over. Nothing can be undone. And that realization, that's the part that makes people fold. That's the part where most people break down, spiral, start bargaining with the universe like it keeps receipts. They replay moments. They screen record their own memories. If only I'd said this. If only I'd left earlier. If only I didn't trust that person. If only I listened. But let me tell you something they never warn you about. There's a specific kind of power that only shows up after it's too late. See, before this moment, you were guessing. Before this moment, you were carrying hope like a burden. Hope people would change. Hope the situation would stabilize. Hope the truth would magically soften itself if you looked at it long enough. But now, hope's gone, and that scares people until they realize what replaces it. Clarity. Cold, sharp, unforgiving clarity. Because when nothing can be undone, there's nothing left to pretend about. No more negotiating with red flags. No more, maybe it'll work itself out. No more audience manipulation where you perform strength just to survive another week. Now you see. You see who stayed silent when it mattered. You see who benefited from your confusion. You see how many people were comfortable warning you instead of standing with you. You see how often you were expected to carry the emotional weight for everyone else just so they wouldn't feel uncomfortable. And yeah, that hurts. But don't confuse pain with weakness. This kind of pain rewires people. Because once you accept that it's already over, you stop trying to save the past. You stop spending your energy rewriting scenes that are locked. You stop explaining yourself to people who already made peace with misunderstanding you. And that's when something dangerous happens. You get intentional. You stop asking, how do I fix this? And you start asking, what does this make me? You realize you're not standing in the wreckage. You're standing in evidence. Evidence of what you survived. Evidence of what you outgrew. Evidence that you can walk through total loss and still be standing upright, still breathing, still thinking 2 steps ahead. People don't like that version of you. They liked you hopeful. They liked you doubting. They liked you when you still waited for permission to move on. But this version doesn't wait. This version doesn't argue, doesn't over-explain, doesn't post emotional status updates begging to be understood. This version watches. This version calculates. This version moves differently. Because when the warning phase is over, you stop looking backward for approval. You stop needing closure from people who benefited from keeping you open-ended. You stop confusing familiarity with safety. You understand something most never do. The end wasn't punishment. It was exposure. It exposed the structure, the alliances, the illusions, the way you were being framed as too much for reacting to things that were objectively wrong, the way your intuition was always right, just inconvenient. And now the noise changes. People sense the shift. They feel it. They don't know how to name it, but they feel that you're not available in the same way anymore. You're calmer, quieter, more precise, and that scares them more than your anger ever did, because anger is loud. Anger can be dismissed, but focus terrifies people. You're no longer begging to be warned. You're no longer waiting to be saved from the impact. You've already absorbed it. And if you're still standing after this, if you can look your reality in the face without romanticizing the damage, then understand this. You're not late. You're not broken. You're not behind. You're activated. And everything from here on out is deliberate. Because once that switch flips inside you, there's no going back to the earlier version that tolerated confusion just to keep the peace. That version already faded the moment you stopped flinching at the truth. You can feel it, can't you? That weird calm under the noise, that steady heartbeat when chaos tries to get a reaction out of you like it used to. People expect a breakdown. They expect tears, rage posts, explanations, closure speeches, something digestible, and you don't give it to them. Your silence hits heavier than any argument ever did. Look at you. Still standing, still functioning, still waking up, still handling business, still showing up in rooms you once thought you'd never survive emotionally. That alone messes with people's heads, because when nothing can be undone, you stop performing emotional gymnastics for anyone else's comfort. You stop shrinking your instincts just to sound reasonable. You stop playing the role of the more understanding person while getting quietly cut at the knees. You remember every time your gut screamed and you talked yourself out of it. Every single moment you knew something wasn't right, but said, "Nah, maybe I'm overthinking." You weren't. You were early, and early always looks crazy until it's proven right. And that realization does something twisted and beautiful at the same time. It hardens your boundaries without hardening your heart. It sharpens your focus without turning you cold. It teaches you how to observe without absorbing other people's mess. You're not trying to be liked anymore. You're trying to be accurate. Every conversation feels different because you hear the gaps between words. You catch the hesitation. You catch the energy shift when you stop over-explaining. People reveal way more when you're not chasing clarity from them. And deep down, they know it. They feel that they lost access to the version of you that needed reassurance. They feel that you're no longer waiting for the warning sign, no longer asking for permission to trust yourself. There's power in that. Not loud power, not flashy power. The calm before impact kind. The kind that walks into a room and changes the temperature without raising its voice. You start moving in silence, not out of fear, not out of spite, but because your energy finally understands its own worth. You don't broadcast plans. You don't debate your healing. You don't explain absences. And every step forward feels heavier and clearer at the same time. Heavier because you know what endings cost. Clearer because illusions don't survive impact. You stop mistaking chaos for excitement. You stop mistaking inconsistency for passion. You stop mistaking struggle for destiny. And people might call it cold. They might call it detached. They might say you changed. They're right. Because the version of you that needed warnings died quietly the moment reality stopped negotiating. And what's left isn't bitter. What's left is awake. Awake in a way that doesn't announce itself. Awake like somebody who's been burned once and absorbed the heat instead of flinching away from it. Awake enough to notice patterns before they repeat. Awake enough to stop calling chaos bad luck. and start seeing it for what it really was the whole time. You walk differently through conversations. You pause longer before responding. You don't rush to fill silence anymore because silence tells you everything you need to know if you let it breathe for a second. People start exposing themselves without realizing they're doing it, and you're just standing there nodding, clocking it, not reacting the way they rehearsed for. That's new for you. There was a time when you would have jumped in, defended yourself, clarified intentions, tried to smooth things over like it was your responsibility to keep the emotional temperature comfortable. That version of you burned out quietly. No announcement, no dramatic exit. It just stopped showing up. And look, this isn't you becoming heartless. This is you finally charging people the real price of access. Attention isn't free anymore. Energy isn't unlimited. Trust isn't handed out just because someone sounds confident or familiar. You start choosing where you sit, where you speak, where you invest your focus like it actually costs something. Because it does. Every misplaced ounce of it drains you faster than hard work ever could. People feel the difference. They try to pull you back into old rhythms. They joke, they reminisce. They bring up the good times as bait, hoping nostalgia will soften you enough to reopen doors you already closed in your mind. You smile, maybe even laugh, but inside there's a quiet no that doesn't need to be spoken out loud. Because you remember how it ended. You remember the moment everything snapped into place. The moment the warning bells stopped ringing and truth went dead silent. That silence taught you more than all the advice in the world ever did. You stopped needing reassurance once you proved to yourself that you could carry the outcome. And that changes the way fear interacts with you. Fear doesn't control you the same. It tries, but you've already lived through the version you were most afraid of and survived it without applause. That's the part nobody sees. They think strength looks loud. They think confidence posts selfies and captions and speeches. They don't see this kind of strength because it's internal, because it's quiet, because it doesn't need witnesses. You don't chase validation when you realize peace feels better than being right in front of the wrong people. You don't argue your worth when you understand that misunderstanding was never the issue. You were clear, they just didn't want to hear it. And there's something almost dangerous about how calm you are with that truth. You stop overthinking texts. You stop rereading conversations. You stop building imaginary futures with people who couldn't even be consistent in the present. You start trusting your timing. You start trusting your reactions. You start trusting that pull in your chest that tightens whenever something's off. You don't gaslight yourself out of it anymore. This version of you doesn't rush healing like it's a deadline. It doesn't numb itself with distractions just to avoid sitting with uncomfortable clarity. It just observes, integrates, adapts. Every move has weight. Every decision feels intentional, not rushed, not forced. Intentional in that grounded way that comes from knowing exactly what it costs to be wrong about people. You don't need revenge. You don't need closure conversations that turn into emotional wrestling matches. You already saw the pattern from start to finish. And the wild part, the more you accept that nothing can be undone, the less it owns you. It becomes a reference point instead of a wound, a reminder of how sharp you are when you stop ignoring yourself. And that reminder sticks with you when you step into situations that used to shrink you. When your shoulders would tense up and your mind would start racing through worst-case scenarios. like a browser with too many tabs open. That doesn't happen the same way anymore. Something in you stays grounded, not numb, grounded. You notice how certain people talk around things instead of about them, how accountability suddenly sounds like an attack when it's aimed at the right place, how confidence without substance collapses the moment it's questioned. You catch all of it. You just don't react the way you used to. There was a time you mistook restraint for weakness. You thought if you weren't responding, you were losing. If you weren't explaining, you were being erased. Turns out silence isn't absence. It's discernment. It's you choosing not to waste ammunition on battles that don't shape you. You carry yourself like someone who's already faced the worst version of the story. Deadlines don't rattle you the same. Threats don't hit as hard. People trying to intimidate you with what might happen don't realize you already lived through what actually did. And yeah, there's humor in it, dark humor. The kind that pulls at the corner of your mouth when someone tries the same old manipulation tactics, like you didn't graduate from that school already. They think they're being subtle. They think you're still guessing. But you're not angry enough anymore to be careless. That's the shift. Your emotions stopped driving the wheel. They sit in the passenger seat, alert, aware, no longer grabbing for control. You don't overshare victories. You don't announce resilience. You let outcomes speak because outcomes are loud without saying a word. And in quieter moments when it's just you and your thoughts, you don't fantasize about rewriting the ending. You don't romanticize alternate timelines. You understand that wishing doesn't change structure, and structure is what actually matters. You move with structure now. Boundaries that don't wobble. Standards that don't explain themselves. Self-trust that doesn't require external confirmation. People sense something's different when they look at you a second longer than usual. They hesitate before crossing lines they used to sprint over. They test your limits less because they feel the clarity standing behind your eyes. You don't need to say you're done tolerating nonsense. Your energy already stopped responding to it. And there's this steady rhythm building underneath everything you do. This internal cadence that wasn't there before. Like you finally synced with your own timing instead of adjusting to everyone else's chaos. And that rhythm keeps pulling you forward through rooms, through conversations, through decisions without asking for permission, without waiting for validation, carrying the weight of what couldn't be undone like armor instead of a scar, moving through the world with that quiet intensity that makes people uneasy because they can't tell whether you're about to walk away or step straight through whatever's in front of you. And that uncertainty follows you, lingers in the air, keeps unfolding. Because people can sense when someone has crossed that invisible line where fear stopped making decisions for them. And they don't know how to act around that kind of presence. They start second-guessing their tone. They start over-explaining jokes that aren't funny. They start asking questions they don't really want answers to, just to hear themselves talk. You see it all happening in real time. The hesitation, the recalibration, the way energy shifts when someone realizes you're not chasing approval or bracing for disappointment anymore. There was a phase when you used to mentally prepare excuses before even speaking, pre-apologize, soften statements, buffer the truth with humor just to keep the peace. That pattern dissolved quietly the moment you understood peace isn't something you negotiate for. It's something you maintain. Your attention spans got shorter for nonsense and longer for substance. You listen differently. You hear intention instead of words. You notice when someone compliments you while trying to put you in a smaller box at the same time. And there's this strange confidence in not rushing to respond, in letting a message sit unread while you live your life, in not panicking when silence stretches longer than expected. Urgency stopped controlling you. That's big. When urgency goes away, manipulation loses its leverage. You don't let deadlines set by other people's anxiety dictate your decisions. You don't mistake pressure for importance anymore. You started respecting yourself enough to pause, enough to think, enough to choose rather than react. People who thrived on your immediate response feel that absence. They prod, they poke, they act confused like you changed overnight, even though the change was gradual, layered, earned. They don't see the late nights where you sat with uncomfortable truths instead of distracting yourself. They don't see how many internal arguments you lost and then finally won. They just notice you're harder to shake. Your emotions matured. They didn't disappear. They matured. Anger stopped spilling everywhere and started sharpening your focus. Sadness stopped dragging you down and started informing your boundaries. You became selective with vulnerability, not closed, selective. There's a difference. You don't confuse accessibility with authenticity anymore. You don't equate loud truth with real truth. You understand some things lose power the moment they're explained to the wrong audience. That's why you carry yourself the way you do. Why your presence feels heavier even when you're not saying much. Why people feel like they're being evaluated without you ever asking questions. Because you already answered the biggest one inside yourself. Whether you could live with the outcome when nothing could be undone. And that answer changed the way everything else lands, the way choices line up, the way risks feel less like threats and more like sharp calculations, the way every step keeps unfolding into the next without needing a finish line, without needing validation, without waiting for permission, just moving, adjusting, sharpening, breathing, staying alert while the world keeps trying to test what it can still pull from you. And finding nothing it can take without your consent. And that realization settles into your body like muscle memory. The kind that kicks in without thinking. The kind that keeps your spine straight when old triggers try to pull you back into reactions that aren't yours anymore. You don't brace the same way. You don't flinch at familiar pressure points. Those buttons still exist, sure, but they stopped working. People underestimate how much strength it takes to stay composed when chaos expects access. They think calm means unaware. They think quiet means empty. They don't understand this level of restraint comes from having already seen what happens when things fall apart. There's a certain edge to you that didn't come from confidence boosters or motivational quotes. It came from consequence, from watching illusions collapse in real time while pretending everything was fine, from carrying weight without a guarantee it would pay off. You don't romanticize struggle anymore. You respect it. You learned where it sharpens you and where it drains you dry. That's why your choices feel colder to people who benefited from your warmth. Conversations change shape around you. You keep things brief, focused, direct. People who rely on emotional fog start stumbling because clarity leaves no room to hide. You trust your read on people fast these days, not rushed fast. There's a difference. Experience compresses time. Once you've lived through patterns repeating, you don't need the full cycle again to recognize the direction it's heading. You don't argue with red flags. You log them. You don't try to convince anyone of what they just showed you. You accept the display. Well, well, well. Look at you. Do you ever just stop, take a breath, and look at what the hell you've become? Because if you haven't, let me be the first to welcome you back. Welcome back to the ruins you crawled out of, to the silence you screamed through, to the fire that didn't burn you alive. It built you. You were never supposed to be here, were you? No, no. You were meant to break, to vanish, to stay shattered. They poked the wounds. They laughed when you cried. They clapped when you fell. And oh, they loved watching you choke on your own pain. But now they don't recognize what's standing in front of them. They thought you'd heal and move on. They thought you'd forgive and forget. They thought you'd patch yourself up, get a new hobby, maybe read some self-help garbage and become normal again. But instead, you became something they never expected. You didn't just heal. You mutated. You evolved. You transformed pain into precision and scars into ammunition. They didn't create a survivor. They forged a goddamn weapon. What the fuck did you turn into? You turned into everything they feared you could be. And now, it's too late. You were the one they underestimated. You were the punchline to their jokes, the disposable one, the scapegoat, the afterthought. But here's the twist. The afterthought outlived the original plan. Now you're writing the ending, and it's not pretty, it's not poetic, it's not some gentle bow on a redemption arc. No, it's blood-soaked, it's furious, it's real. This isn't healing, this is havoc. This is what happens when the wrong person pushes the right soul past the point of return. You don't owe anyone peace anymore. You don't owe them understanding. You don't owe them softness, forgiveness, or closure. They didn't plant flowers in you. They planted landmines, and now they're stepping on every one of them. You see, they wanted you broken because broken things can be controlled. They wanted you desperate so you'd beg for crumbs. They wanted you lonely so you'd cling to their poison and call it love. But you stood in the ashes of all that and said, no more. You didn't come back stronger. You came back smarter. You didn't rise up. You dug deep, built walls, forged weapons. And now when they look at you, they don't see the old you. They see something they can't touch, something they can't manipulate, can't guilt, can't break, can't shame. You terrify them now because they realize they built this. Every time they ignored you, brick. Every lie, nail, every betrayal, gasoline. And you lit the fucking match. You didn't grow, you detonated. They kept asking for peace after they started the war. Now look who's bleeding. You see, they don't get to unleash hell and then cry when the devil shows up wearing your face. They don't get to destroy your sanity, your dreams, your dignity, and then act shocked when you come back with a smile carved in vengeance and your soul armored in rage. This is what happens when someone quiet finally snaps. When someone kind goes cold. When someone loyal turns lethal. You didn't just walk away from the past. You dragged it behind you like a corpse. So every time they look at you, they're reminded of what they did. They see it in your eyes, that dead silence, that calculated calm. The quiet before a storm no one survives. You're not mad anymore. You're beyond mad. You're surgical, precise, unapologetic. Because healing is for people who want to go back to who they were. You don't. You burned that version of you to ash. You buried it without flowers, without tears. And you didn't write a eulogy, you wrote a warning. I don't break anymore. I break others. Oh, they don't like that part, do they? They liked the version of you that apologized for existing. They liked the version of you that bent over backwards just to be tolerated. They loved the one who over-explained every wound like it was their right to understand it. But this version of you, it's a nightmare they can't wake up from. You turned into the thing they never believed you'd become, a mirror. A reflection of every scar they gave you, but multiplied, evolved, weaponized. They thought they buried you in silence, but silence is where monsters are born. You spent nights talking yourself out of suicide, while they slept peacefully. You sat in rooms with a fake smile while your mind screamed so loud you couldn't hear your own heartbeat. You built yourself from the ground up, with no help, no guidance, only shadows and fury. And now that you've made it out, now that you've stopped begging for love and started demanding respect, suddenly you're the problem? No. No more guilt, no more shame. They don't get to call it too much, now that you've become everything too powerful for them to manipulate. You don't want peace. Peace is for people who still have something to lose. You've already lost it all. So now you walk into every room like a loaded gun. You speak like fire. You move like vengeance wrapped in poetry, and they can feel it, that energy, that raw, unshakable force that says, I'm not afraid of anything anymore, especially not you. So what the fuck did you turn into? You turned into the reckoning, the ghost that doesn't haunt. It hunts, the comeback that doesn't knock. It breaks the door down and makes the whole building burn. You're not a survivor. You're the final form of suffering turned sentient. You are the answer to every time someone thought you were weak. They didn't expect this version, because this version isn't about closure. This version is about consequences. You want to know the cruelest part? They don't even remember what they did to you. Not really. To them it was a bad day. To you, it was the beginning of your descent into hell. They called you sensitive, overdramatic, too much. They watched you collapse under the weight of their betrayal, and then stepped over you like trash on the street. And now they flinch when they hear your name whispered in rooms they once dominated. Now they sweat when they see your face rising in the places they swore you'd never reach. Because you're not just standing again, you're hovering above them, unrecognizable, untouchable, undeniable. They look at you now and say, you've changed. Damn right you have. You changed so hard, even your shadow's afraid of you. You don't walk with fear in your eyes anymore. You walk like a funeral in motion, like a memory they never wanted to face again. This isn't a redemption arc. This isn't your come to Jesus moment. This is your villain origin story, and the world is gonna feel every chapter. You didn't climb back up the ladder. You ripped it off the wall and started swinging. You turned your trauma into tactics. You turned rejection into results. You turned isolation into independence so lethal they can't breathe around it. And what do they say now? You're cold. You're arrogant. You've got an attitude. No. You've got clarity. You've got armor. You've got a spine made of every time you had to swallow your pain while they laughed in your face. Let them talk. Let them whine. Let them paint you as the monster. Because they forgot one little detail. Monsters don't fear the dark. They control it. They thought pain would weaken you. But you built a kingdom inside that pain. And now you sit on a throne of every no you ever heard, every insult you buried, every breakdown they walked away from, and you smile. Because they can't hurt you anymore. Not because they stopped trying, but because you stopped needing them to understand. What the fuck did you turn into? You turned into the thing they swore you'd never become. Free. Free from their approval, free from their permission, free from the chains of playing nice just to stay acceptable in the eyes of cowards. You turned into fire with no off switch, a storm with no mercy, a soul that's been reborn without apology. And now it's your turn to be the nightmare. You don't knock her, you enter, you don't warn, you act. You don't break down anymore, you break through. Because this isn't healing, this is havoc, and they asked for it. Oh, you ever realize how people only ask if you're okay after they watch you burn? They all want to act like they care once the fire's already swallowed everything, once there's nothing left to save, once you've become the flame itself. But where the hell were they when your hands were shaking in the dark, begging for anything to hold on to? Where were they when your thoughts screamed louder than your voice ever could? Where were they when the world became so heavy you started planning your exit just to breathe again? Nowhere. They were busy. Busy ignoring you. Busy betraying you. Busy sharpening their knives while smiling to your face. And now that those knives are in your hands, now that you've learned how to wield the very weapons they used to cut you down, suddenly you're the dangerous one. Good. Let them fear you. Because fear is honest. It's the only language some people understand. They didn't listen when you begged, didn't listen when you cried, didn't listen when you broke. So now they'll listen when the earth shakes beneath your steps. They'll listen when your silence starts screaming truth louder than their guilt can deny. You've stopped explaining yourself, because explanations are for people who care. And these people, they never gave a damn about you. They only cared about controlling you. But control only works on the weak. And you've been through too much, lost too much, endured too much to be owned by anyone ever again. What the fuck did you turn into? You turned into your own salvation. You became your own damn rescue team. When no one came to save you, you became the wrath they should have prayed never woke up. They used to call you emotional. Now they call you heartless. They used to say, you're too kind. Now they say, you've changed. They're right. You did change. You killed the version of you that tolerated that bullshit. And the death wasn't peaceful. It was war. It was chaos. It was nights of bleeding and shaking and screaming into the void until your soul cracked open. And something ancient crawled out. Something that remembered every name, every lie, every back turned. Something that doesn't forget. You didn't evolve into a hero. You didn't bloom into some poetic phoenix. You descended. You corrupted. You became the answer to the pain, not the escape from it. And now you look at the world with new eyes. Eyes that see everything. The manipulation, the masks, the hidden knives behind soft voices. And you smile. Because you're not confused anymore. You're not lost. You're not begging for crumbs. You're taking back everything they stole. And you're doing it without mercy. This is your world now. And anyone who touched your trauma better start praying, because the one they broke is gone, and the one that replaced them doesn't play fair. This isn't healing, this is havoc. And every scream, every scar, every second of suffering was the price they paid to summon you. They built this monster. Now they get to meet it. They thought your silence meant weakness. But silence is what happens right before the detonation. You weren't healing. You were calculating. You were studying. You were letting the venom settle in your bloodstream until it became your fuel. They thought you went quiet because you gave up. No, you went quiet because you leveled up beyond language. You stopped trying to prove your worth. You stopped trying to be the bigger person. You stopped setting yourself on fire to keep cowards warm. Because you realized it was never about being better than them. It was about outlasting them. And now, you're not standing in front of them. You're standing above them. Not because you climbed a ladder they built, but because you dismantled theirs and built a fortress with the wreckage. And that fortress, it's made of every breakdown you survived. Every time you looked in the mirror and didn't recognize your own face. Every time you screamed into the dark and the dark screamed back. Every time you were told you were too much, or worse, not enough. You turned every failure into a blade, every loss into a shield, every rejection into a roar. And now you walk with that energy, that untouchable atomic no-return energy. You don't just enter rooms anymore, you shift the gravity inside them. People feel you now, not because you're loud, but because you've become the epicenter of consequence. They used to ignore you. Now they watch their words around you. They used to mock you. Now they lower their gaze. Because deep down, they know. They know what they did. They know what they tried to break. They know how hard they pushed. And they know that whatever you are now, they're not ready for it. Because here's the truth they'll never admit. You were never the villain. You were the target. You were the one they tried to chain, to shrink, to silence, because something in you terrified them from the start. You didn't destroy the peace. You destroyed the illusion. They painted you as unstable. But really, you were just awake. They painted you as selfish, but you were just done bleeding for people who never bled for you. They called you ruthless because you finally refused to be used. What the fuck did you turn into? You turned into a force of reckoning. You turned into a voice that doesn't shake anymore. A presence that doesn't ask to be respected. It demands it by default. You turned into someone that doesn't wait to be understood. You speak, and the world has to adjust. Because this version of you, it's not a phase, it's not a mask, it's not a mood. It's a permanent scar that walks, breathes, and bites back. This isn't your comeback. This is your declaration of war. This is the warning they never saw coming, the prophecy written in trauma, etched in survival, and delivered with a vengeance wearing your smile. You don't want closure. You want results. You don't need peace. You are the storm. They asked for this. They poked the demon, mocked the process, laughed at your pain. Now they don't get to play victim. Now they face the final product. The one who doesn't forget. The one who doesn't bow. The one who doesn't blink. This isn't healing. This is havoc. And the most terrifying part? You're just getting started. You ever watch people suddenly become spiritual once you stop playing nice? Suddenly it's, you've changed. You're toxic. You need help. No, you got help. Just not the kind they wanted you to get. You didn't crawl back to them. You didn't ask for forgiveness. You didn't beg for understanding. You dismantled your own damn cage, piece by piece. And by the time they looked up, you were already unrecognizable. See, they loved you when you were manageable, when you were bending over backwards, when you were doubting yourself, when you were desperate for a crumb of their validation. They don't love the new you, because the new you doesn't need them anymore. The new you is fluent in silence, fluent in wrath, fluent in self-respect, so sharp it slices their fake concern in half. You used to be a mirror. reflecting whatever they wanted to see. But now you're a weaponized truth, and they can't handle the reflection. You stopped apologizing for surviving. You stopped shrinking to fit their comfort. You stopped pretending that what they did didn't destroy you. Because it did. But you know what else it did? It resurrected something ancient, something deeper than forgiveness, something louder than closure. It unleashed the version of you that doesn't ask, doesn't wait, doesn't break. You are the final result of every single time they thought you'd stayed down. But you didn't. You rose, not beautifully, not softly, not with grace. You rose like an earthquake. You came back wrong, on purpose. You came back with shadows in your blood and fire in your breath. And now you haunt them. Not because you try to, but because your existence is a reminder of what they failed to erase. They called you broken, but broken things don't build empires. They called you lost, but lost souls don't carry storms in their eyes. They called you angry, and they're damn right. You carry righteous rage in your chest like a second heartbeat, not to destroy the world, but to burn away every lie they ever fed you. This isn't vengeance, this is balance. This is the universe correcting itself through your scars. This is every ounce of pain you endured with interest. This is the cost of trying to shatter someone who refused to stay shattered. And now, you walk differently, talk differently. You're not looking for peace. You are the consequence of what happens when peace is denied too long. You are the aftershock, the fallout, the lesson they never learned until it was too late. They didn't want healing. They wanted control. They didn't want forgiveness. They wanted submission. But now they face the full weight of what they created. Because what the fuck did you turn into? You turned into every warning they laughed at. You turned into the punishment they never saw coming. This isn't about proving anything anymore. This is about becoming so powerful that you don't have to speak. Your energy walks into the room 10 minutes before you do, and every insecure soul feels it in their teeth. You're not a comeback story. You're not a redemption arc. You are the living proof that some people survive the fire by becoming it. This isn't healing. This is havoc, and they lit the match. You know what they hate the most? Not your anger, not your silence, not even your power. They hate the fact that they couldn't erase you. Because they tried. Oh, how they tried. They fed you doubt like it was oxygen. They laughed at your dreams until you started questioning if they were nightmares. They watched you drown, and instead of helping, they took notes. So when you finally clawed your way to the surface, gasping, bloody, barely alive, they weren't proud. They were terrified. Because something came back with you. Something they couldn't name. Something they couldn't kill. That's what you are now. Unkillable. Not invincible. Not perfect. Not untouchable. No. Far worse. You are relentless. You're not seeking revenge. You are revenge. You're not proving them wrong. You've already proven yourself right, just by surviving. They thought the story was over when they walked away. They thought you'd stay shattered, whispering apologies to ghosts. But you didn't stay broken. You built a kingdom out of the ashes they left you in. And now you don't just walk through fire. You command it. You are what happens when pain doesn't destroy you. It teaches you to see in the dark. You are what happens when every no becomes a blueprint, when every betrayal becomes ammo, when every wound becomes armor. You no longer live for their comfort. You no longer wait for permission. You no longer fear being too much. Deep down, they know. You turned into the part of the story where gods remember why they feared monsters. And baby, you're just getting started.